My name is Kathy. I'm 40 years old and I work in an office. I live with my husband Bob, who's 3 years older than me and works with me in the same company. We've been married for 10 years, but we don't have any kids. Since I got married when I was 30, I've always felt a strong desire to start a family. Both Bob and I wanted children. Even though men don't have a biological clock like women, I felt like I had until I was 35 to have kids because I'm not very physically strong. I wanted to have the energy to go through pregnancy and raising children. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. We tried to have a baby right after getting married, but it didn't happen. So, we went to see a doctor who specializes in women's health to find out what was going on. The tests showed that I had some issues that made it hard for me to get pregnant. It wasn't impossible, but the chances were very low, and it would be a challenge. Bob was really disappointed when he heard the news. He wondered if he could ever be a father. Seeing him upset like that, I didn't know what to say. We kept trying to have a baby, but it seemed like an impossible task. I tried to cheer up my sad husband by telling him that not having a child isn't the end of everything. I suggested we enjoy our lives together just as a couple. He seemed to agree, resigned to the situation, saying there wasn't much we could do about it, so we might as well go with the flow. But over time, Bob started to change. When we saw families with kids out and about, he'd wonder aloud if we could have had fun family outings like that. And when we visited friends who had children, he'd comment on how lucky they were and seemed jealous. It made me wonder if he couldn't let go of the idea of having a child deep down. I felt uncomfortable. Then things started to get tense between us. When we were trying to get pregnant, Bob used to help out a lot around the house, worried that I might overdo it and affect my chances of conceiving. He'd insist on doing heavy lifting and took on a lot of household chores on weekends. But once it became clear that I couldn't have a child, he stopped doing anything. He said he was tired and that housework was the wife's responsibility. It felt like he was blaming me for not being able to have a baby. After that, Bob started spending his weekends just relaxing. He'd either sleep or play on his phone all day. Suddenly, I found myself with more chores to do, and my health started to decline. When I got sick with a fever or stomach ache, he'd simply tell me to deal with it myself and wouldn't even bother to take care of me. I couldn't argue with him because, in a way, he was right. I was the reason we couldn't have a child. I began to wonder if getting a divorce was the right decision. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Bob got transferred for a big project at another company. It was in a different state, and he ended up moving there for work. Naturally, I assumed I would go with him, but he said I didn't need to. He insisted he could handle it alone. Hearing those words, I took some time to think. Maybe our separation would give him space to sort out his feelings, especially since he seemed frustrated and distant because of our infertility issues. So I agreed to stay behind, telling him it was okay and that I'd take care of things here. When Bob left, he would only come home about once a month. Even when he did, he'd quickly say he was busy and had to leave again. It became routine, but despite the short visits, I was glad to see him because it meant he still cared enough to come back. As time passed, something unexpected happened. Bob started to change. At first, he was the same as always, but gradually he became kinder. He'd bring me little gifts, saying he bought something for me to enjoy, or he'd even go shopping with me. It felt like a small but significant shift in our relationship. Even though he had limited time, Bob would check in on me regularly, asking if there was anything bothering me. I thought he had returned to being his kind self. Initially, his work assignment was supposed to last for 1 year, but it ended up lasting 2 years due to project delays. By the second year, he stopped bringing up our infertility issues when we saw families with children. Instead, he admitted that we couldn't have kids together, but reassured me he had come to terms with it. I felt relieved knowing he had accepted our situation. 2 years later, Bob completed his assignment and returned home. I welcomed him back, feeling relieved that we could finally be together again. We resumed living together peacefully, but that tranquility didn't last long. Shortly after his return, he dropped a bombshell on me. he mentioned a young girl in his family who had a baby before getting married. She couldn't raise the child alone because she was too young. Bob suggested that we adopt the child and raise it as our own. I was completely taken aback by this sudden proposal. When I asked him what was going on, he explained that since we couldn't have a child of our own, he thought adopting this baby would be a good idea. Overwhelmed by this unexpected suggestion, I asked for some time to think about it and ended the conversation there. Something felt off about Bob's story. His family lived far away, and we didn't have much contact with them. Our relationship with his relatives was distant, to the point where we only exchanged Christmas cards once a year. Plus, we didn't have a traditional wedding ceremony, so I didn't know his family well. Despite feeling uneasy, I reluctantly considered adopting a child from someone I barely knew. I asked Bob if I could meet the child's parents to learn more about them, but he refused firmly. He questioned why it mattered who the parents were and why I was so interested. But I believed it was important to understand the situation fully. I wanted to know why the parents couldn't raise the child and what happened to the child's father. When I pushed for answers, Bob got angry and accused me of prying too much. He even threatened to end our relationship if I didn't agree to take in the child. In that moment, it became clear to me that Bob's true priority was having a child, no matter the cost. My feelings and concerns didn't seem to matter to him. I realized I had reached my limit, so I agreed to leave. I packed up my things and found temporary shelter in a motel near the train station, not knowing where else to go. The divorce proceedings with my husband went smoothly. We settled everything through a lawyer to avoid any disputes, including matters like alimony and property division. It all ended without any problems. Feeling uncomfortable working at the same company as my ex-husband, I decided to quit and found a new job at a small law firm. With my computer skills and administrative assistant certifications, I managed to get hired there. It took some time to adjust to the new workplace, but I eventually found my rhythm and led a peaceful life. After living separately from my husband for 2 years, I had grown accustomed to coming home to an empty room. Then, one day, about a year into my new life, my ex-husband unexpectedly showed up at my workplace holding a small child. Surprised to see me, he asked why I was there. When I reminded him that I worked there, he looked shocked. After escorting him to my supervising attorney, I learned a shocking truth. My ex-husband confessed that he suspected the child he was holding, born a year ago, wasn't his. He wanted to dispute the paternity, but legally he could only do so within a year of the child's birth. Even if a DNA test proved the child wasn't his, he would still have to pay child support. I recorded their conversation as a clerk and realized that he had cheated on me during our marriage and fathered a child. Judging by the child's age and the timing of his business trip, it was clear that the child was conceived around a year after he had been away on that trip. Suddenly, his unusually kind behavior towards me during that time made sense. Since then, I began to realize that my ex-husband might have been feeling guilty. It seemed like his current wife, who was younger and worked with us, was aware of our history. Whenever he spoke, he would steal glances at me with a pale face. It was understandable. After all, his ex-wife, whom he tried to leave with the child from his affair a year ago, was right there. Eventually, he agreed to take a DNA test and left with a somber expression. I confided in my lawyer, Mr. Williams, about the situation. When my ex-husband's visit came to light, Mr. Williams was surprised and informed me that I could claim alimony for infidelity within 2 years of discovery. I wasted no time and decided to claim alimony from both my ex-husband and his current wife, who was once his mistress. To ensure they couldn't evade it, I sent the claim to their homes, workplaces, and even his in-laws' place. Shortly after, I received a call from my ex-husband expressing disbelief about the claim. He argued that since we were already divorced, he shouldn't have to pay alimony. I calmly reminded him of the legal timeline, stating that I was well within my rights to claim alimony due to his infidelity, which had only come to light recently. Unexpectedly, A woman's voice I didn't recognize intervened, demanding that I withdraw the claim, claiming to be his wife. Surprised, I asked who I was speaking with, to which she confirmed she was his current wife. She admitted that she knew he had lied about being single when they started dating but didn't care about it. The fact remains that you had an affair with my husband, and I'll be taking a neat $20,000 from each of you. Our child will need financial support as they grow, and that's non-negotiable. But we can't afford such a huge amount. $40,000 is too much, she protested. That's not my problem, I retorted. You both have jobs and decent incomes. Plus, sending the claim caused my husband to get demoted and me to lose hours, resulting in a pay cut. We simply can't afford it. Then ask your parents for help, I suggested. I won't back down on this. I absolutely refuse to pay, she shouted, and my husband returned to the phone, pleading, We're facing financial difficulties. Could you please drop the claim? No, I won't drop it, I replied firmly. And while we're at it, remember the fertility test we took a few years ago? Yeah, we did. Although it turned out I had a problem, he recalled. The test results also showed that you had an issue, I revealed. You're kidding, right? He exclaimed. No, it's true. I didn't want to hurt you, so I kept it a secret at the time. But I still have the paper with the results. Want me to send it to you? When I revealed the truth about our fertility issues to Bob, he reacted by insisting it was a lie. It seemed like the shock had him denying everything. However, the reality was that the doctor had indeed confirmed significant issues on both our ends. When Bob heard about my problem, he was so shocked that he left the doctor's office before hearing the full explanation. Initially, I had planned to keep this fact to myself, but I decided there was no point in hiding it anymore. After informing Bob of the truth, he continued to deny it, but I ended the conversation, feeling there was no use arguing further. In the end, I managed to receive a total of $20,000 each from them for emotional distress, totaling $40,000. She refused to pay her share, so it seems Bob took on the entire burden. Later, it was discovered through a DNA test that the child was not Bob's, confirming his fears. He's now contemplating divorcing his wife, but the financial strain of child support and emotional distress compensation has tied him to the marriage. He confided in me that he only wanted me to raise the child with his affair partner because she's quite strong-willed. He admitted that if he had custody of the child, he would find an excuse to break up with her. Currently, Bob's relationship with his wife is strained, and the atmosphere at home is tense. At work, they face judgment from their peers as the adulterous couple, making things even more challenging for them. As for me, I've grown accustomed to my single life and find fulfillment in my work and socializing with friends. I have plans to go on a trip with my friends during the next long holiday, and despite being alone,